Hello, 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 everyone. It's Dr. Tamara Beckford with the Dr. Tamara Beckford Show. Okay, I have one of my favorite people here on today. I'm very excited, as usual, to have my wonderful guest. But this guest, we're really going to go into something that's so important for so many of us, right? Which is the mind and our unconscious thoughts, our unconscious beliefs, and the power that it can hold over us. So
Mhm.
today, she's going to really help us to break some of these molds, things that's been holding us hostage for a long time. She's going to tell us how she does that. And she's going to let us know how she does that for corporations. Okay. Alrighty.
Mhm. Yeah.
So let me bring her in my usual fashion. So this wonderful doctor, sister doctor of mine, she is a graduate of Morehouse School of Medicine. She did her residency in family medicine at Florida Hospital. She's an integrative physician, a thought leader, a master trainer of neurolinguistics programming. She does hypnosis. I mean, is there anything she can't do? Let me tell you. This is just the beginning. She's also a trauma informed communicator, and she is the founder of Remapping Mind. Sorry, founder of Mind Remapping Company. She helps organizations create a culture of safety, trust, inclusiveness, belonging, and well-being so that the leaders and employees will feel not only seen, heard, respected, welcomed, and valued, but also she helps them to foster a thriving and engaged and healthy workforce within that organization. She focuses on equity and inclusion in healthcare and in corporate spaces. She also bridges the gap between knowing and doing, teaching her audience the tools to master their communication, their thoughts habit, and also she helps them to mitigate harm, create psychologically safe interactions, and become responsible for the impact of their words and behaviors. Not only does she do all of this, she's a TEDx speaker. She did the TEDx in Asheville. She is also an author, and she co authored a book called Conscious Anti Racism. And she is also a podcast host. So if y'all don't want to listen to me, you can listen to her. Who am I talking about? The one and only Dr. Maiysha Clairborne. Woo! Hello, hello. Yes. Welcome,
Lord,
welcome, welcome, Dr. Maiysha. How are you?
I am doing so well. I just love this. I mean, you already know how much I'm a fan of you and how fun I think you are. And so this conversation, I'm so excited to be here on the show and to be having this conversation with you.
Yes, I am also. And there's so much that we're going to dive into, but I usually like to bring it back for those who are listening and they want to get to know you a little bit more. And we're going to do that by finding out like what made you decide to do medicine in the first place.
Oh, this is a fun question, and I haven't gotten to answer it in a really long time. So,
Mhm.
some people, when they decide to do medicine, it's because they were inspired by their doctor, maybe their pediatrician as a
Yes.
child. Well, for me, it was an eighth grade writing assignment, and what it was that we had to write colleges to like in it to what's the word I want to say, to inquire or to show our interest. That's what it was,
Mm.
to show our interest in the college. We were learning in eighth grade how to write college letters. And I had this book of colleges, and I was looking through the book and I saw this university called Emory University. And I
Mhm.
and I happened to see School of Medicine. Now, admittedly, my dad is OBGYN doc, retired.
Mhm.
My mom is a dentist, retired. So maybe it's a little bit in my blood.
Mhm.
However, I saw School of Medicine. I saw Atlanta, Georgia. I grew up in Huntsville. And I thought, huh, well, Atlanta's close enough to where I can get home when I need to, but far enough away so my mom can't visit me every weekend. Emory University School of Medicine sounds good. I will write them. So I write them, and fast forward some weeks or months later, they write me back and they say, sure, we'd love to have you on our campus. And that was the day I decided I would go to medical school, just like that.
Wow.
I know, right? Random. It
A writing assignment
was a random.
to where you sat and said, I'm going to think about this from a logistic standpoint. How far? And then the thing about it, eighth grade far is different than adult far, right?
Right, right.
Eighth grade distance is different than adult distance. And but they wrote you back. Now, interestingly so, I did not talk about the undergrad portion of your bio. I started
Mhm.
with the medical school. But for those who are listening, let them know, where did you end up going to undergrad?
I went to Emory University undergrad. So they wrote me back, and I decided that was where I was going to school in that moment.
Wow. And I love how you made that definitive decision in eighth grade. Now, in eighth grade, we're like, what, 13, 12 going on
Something
13?
like that.
No, 13. Okay. And so you kept on that for those next 4 years,
Mhm,
zoned in to this. So
mhm,
now, you did Emory undergrad and then you did med school.
mhm.
So you went a little further because she went up to, oh no, you were still
I
there,
stayed,
right?
yeah, I stayed.
Yeah, you still there in that area for
Mhm.
medical school. You did med school at Morehouse.
I did.
Um, Now you're in med school. You mentioned it's like that your dad's OB
Mhm,
and your mom's dentist.
mhm.
You decided to do medicine, but I noticed that you're not an OB. You did family medicine. So tell us, what made you veer into that
You
direction?
know, it's very interesting. We have this joke. My mom's a dentist, my dad's an OBGYN doctor, so we used to joke. My mom takes the top, my dad takes the bottom, and I'm everything
That's
in
true. The
in the middle.
northern and the southern hemisphere. That's what I tell
Yes,
my patients.
exactly. And I took everything in between, from the womb to the tomb, that is. But,
Absolutely.
I think that for me, what attracted me to family medicine was the variety.
Mm,
It was just the sheer variety. And I actually really did love women's health and OBGYN. I actually contemplated going into OB/GYN, but it was the lifestyle and the hours as I watched my father. I said,
mhm,
no, that's not for me. I already knew. And I almost did a fellowship in maternal and child health.
mhm,
But I think at the end of the day, I just really liked the variety. And what served me is I also went into integrative medicine. Before it was popular, I started doing integrative therapies, and family medicine was the perfect specialty for that. But I think
absolutely.
what really stuck it for me was the year after my first year in medical school, I shadowed a physician here in Georgia, in Douglasville, Villa Rica, Georgia, Dr. Kelvin Burton. I'll never forget it. Shout out if
Mm.
he ever listens, I'll have to forward this to him.
Yes.
And he showed me the breadth and the joy of what family medicine could be. And that was when I decided.
Just clinched it, just like
Yeah,
that.
I could see kids, I could see women, I could see elders, I could see, men, I could do procedures, as many or as little as I wanted. It's such a flexible specialty.
Oh, love it, love it. Then the joys, and shout out to all our family medicine doc. I always say emergency medicine, we kind of like the version of family medicine. We're the speeded up version. For those who remember with the VCRs, when you hit that
Right,
button, so
right.
that's emergency medicine there. Now, you're there as a family medicine doc. You have started acquiring all these additional skills,
Yeah.
neurolinguistics, hypnosis. When did that get into play? When did you decide to open the breadth of your knowledge base with
Mhm.
these additional trainings?
Well, I'm gonna tell you, Dr. Tamara, I actually started that in medical school. So I
Really?
sta my the opening of mind to different skill set began my first year in medical school when I read this book called Between Heaven and Earth, and it talked about traditional Chinese medicine and the five element theory. So it was the first time that I started to think about and understand how our mind played into our well-being and our health. And I
Mhm.
delved into energy work. I was a yogi. I delved into aromatherapy and herbal medicine. Like there were all these things that I delved into, and I actually studied. This is my crazy mind. I studied traditional Chinese text along with our medical text throughout
Wait, you
medicine.
were able to do both at the same time?
I
I was
did.
barely
I,
getting through my regular text, and
I
you
did
added an
parallel
additional.
reading. Now I had to skip some classes to do that. Like I had to do a lot of home study, but
Yes.
I did a lot of parallel reading because I wanted to understand how
Mhm.
does the other side, this natural, this what people used to call alternative medicine, how does it align with what we're doing, what we're learning? And the truth is, it aligns so much, which is why I love now they call it integrative.
Yes.
And so that was really the beginning of me expanding beyond what my traditional training would be, and it just grew from there. When I finished residency, I went and did a training in acupuncture. I did actually two trainings in acupuncture, and
Mhm.
then I started to recognize that when I would be on that, when I'd have my patients on the acupuncture table, they were talking to me, and I was coaching them. And I
Mhm.
thought, well, if I'm going to be coaching them, I should be trained to do it. Like I should be able to do it well. So that
Mhm.
was when I delved into coaching. And somewhere along the way, I met a hypnotherapist and I met a person who practiced neurolinguistic programming. And it was interesting to me. And I thought, wow, what if I could get to the root of all the resistance that patients have to shifting their lifestyle, to taking ownership of their well-being? What if I could get
Mhm.
to the root of that? And
Yes.
that's what got me into neurolinguistic programming. But once I started it and I started to, my what we didn't say is my undergraduate degree is in psychology. So I
Yes.
already love the brain and all things human behavior. And so it was
Mhm.
no accident that I came across neurolinguistic program, because then it was when I got into it and I thought, oh, this is the inner workings of the mind and how we do the things we do and why we do the things we do and our unconscious beliefs and how they impact and how we think our conscious mind is running the show when it's really not.
Isn't that interesting?
Isn't it interesting?
Is and that leads me to that very statement. We think our conscious minds are running the show, but
Oh
it's
yeah.
our unconscious mind, that's really taken a huge part. When is it that a lot of our unconscious thoughts, when is it that it comes into play? When did it truly begin? Like, is it because
Well,
I had skin my knee at 2 and I never gave up, and therefore I'm just always, afraid of running? Like, when is that it truly become part of us just to guide the decisions or indecisions that we have as adults?
I mean, it really the unconscious mind is present when you're born, right? And after the
Mhm,
first 10 years of our life are the magic years. They were sponges. So a lot of what we're learning, a lot of
mhm,
what we are absorbing consciously as children, and consciously even more than unconsciously. So
mhm.
that the unconscious mind begins at the moment of birth. And some people will say even in the womb. And some
Wow.
people say, there's this if you look at, if you read any of Carl Jung's work,
Mhm,
Jungian psychology talks about archetypes and talks about the collective consciousness and the collective unconsciousness. And so there are some who believe that unconscious actually spans across generations. So it depends on your belief systems. One could say the collective unconscious spans across generations and generations. And consciously, in this lifetime, in this present moment that we're experiencing in our body, the moment
mhm.
of birth or in the womb.
Yes. Alrighty. So when we start with this indecisions
Mhm,
and the fears that
mhm,
hold us back,
yeah,
what is truly going on? Because someone might feel confident,
mhm,
but are still doing things that we would, dare we say, even sabotage themselves
mhm,
from moving on. Like,
yeah,
what is it that's going on at that time? And then we're going to bring it into the corporate space of,
yeah.
how some of the leaders might not be able to notice these things amongst their teams and be able to help them to move beyond that. So let's talk about, like, first the individual. What's going on in that person's mind that's holding them back or making them sabotage themselves from being great?
Yeah, we can now. So, I'll say, as we talk about the individual, this applies. Anything that I say at the individual level applies to the leader, applies to the team, applies to the CEO, applies to anyone who is, has goals and notices patterns in their
Yes.
behavior, notices communication patterns in their behavior, notices interaction patterns with their colleagues, right? So,
Hmm.
even as we talk about the individual, it applies to the corporate professional as well. And so, one of the things that when you start to notice these patterns, where that can come from is past experience, whether it's
Mhm.
a childhood experience, whether it's an experience in training. Oftentimes there's something that happens, something that someone says to us, something that we observe, something that we experience vicariously or secondhand. And that in that moment, it gives us an emotion. Maybe there's
Mhm.
trauma there. It gives us an emotion. It gives us a self talk. And we make a decision. We make a decision about ourselves. We make a
Mhm.
decision about someone else, or we make a decision about a circumstance or the world.
Mm.
And that is perturbating all the filters that we have. And then we react based on those. And we spend time building evidence for that thing that we decided is true. And so it'll continue to play out because what we perceive, what we focus on is what we perceive. So if we are
Mhm.
focusing on, I'm going to find evidence. See, I told you this is true about me. See, I told you I'm incapable. See, I told you I'm not going to get promoted. See, I told you that I'm not an effective leader. See, I told you, like all of these things, you're looking for evidence of that. And the
Mm.
more we focus on that, this is the way our unconscious mind works, right? What we focus on, we produce. And the more we focus on what we are not trying to be or focusing on what we're running away from, the more we produce that result.
Ah, wow. So really, we have now just expanded on if you have a thought, and even if the thought is a micro thought,
Mhm,
right? The fact that you're zoning in on that thought, it now becomes magnified and it's
mhm,
amplified. And I love the things that you've mentioned, wherein we start to create these results. So we aren't, it's not happening magically. We are actually creating it. And then we're creating the evidence for it,
mhm,
which goes along for us to now use that as our justification
mhm.
for for even just a micro thought.
Yeah,
How
absolutely.
powerful.
And this is how powerful it is, right? Because we can't ignore that there are things that happen in the world, right? But when
Mhm,
we pan back up to this collective consciousness,
mhm,
when you have enough people collectively focusing, right? You have like this sort of collective bias thinking or collective
mhm,
directionality of thinking, then yes, you will create larger systems and societal norms and societal beliefs. So then
mhm.
what it takes to dismantle these things, if you want to dismantle them in society, if you want to dismantle them in a culture inside of an organization, is the dismantling of the individual thinking that led to that.
Wow. Now, an organization might be sitting and saying, like, oh my gosh, if this is all an individual thinking, like, how can I get to all my individuals within the organization to dismantle this? Because I see how it's holding us back from our greatness. We're
Mhm.
producing, but we're producing only 60% mass when I know we can get to 95%.
Yeah.
What are some ways that you're able to help them to do that?
Well, Dr. Tamara, I think that it's the most important thing is to start with things that feel workable.
Mm,
You
okay.
overwhelm yourself with, oh my God, I have to change everyone's mindset.
Yes. And that, I'm pretty
Then
sure it's the first thing that's going through their minds.
right. It's like, well, no. All you have to do is give them this a single idea that shifts their thinking, that leads to the next single idea and tool, right?
Mhm.
Because ideas don't change people, ideas don't change organizations, action does, and
Absolutely.
skills do. And so that's the
Absolutely.
biggest gap that I see in organizational culture is like people understand things like psychological safety. They understand what it is. I mean, some people
Mhm.
don't actually, but
Yeah.
those who do, they understand what it is,
Well, for
but not
those who don't, since we're going to really be going into a little bit, like, let's tell them what psychological safety is, because they might just think, like, wait a minute, does that have to do with that switch, that button that I hit with that safety button? Just give them a little piece of what
Yeah,
psychological
of course.
safety is.
When I speak about psychological safety, I'm speaking about the ability to be able to feel safe, to be included, to learn and make mistakes, to express oneself fully, to be oneself fully in your identity, to be able to challenge the status quo, be creative outside the box without fear of humiliation, retaliation, punishment, and those things. So
Mhm,
that's the sort of the definition of
mhm.
psychological safety. And then there are a lot of nuances inside of how you create it, but the bottom line is psychological safety involves creating trust,
Yes.
cultivating trust. And when there's that deep trust, then that's the grounds, that's the fertilizer for
Mhm.
creating psychologically safe environments.
Absolutely. So I love we have the psychological safety that we've created, that trust, that bond between
Mhm,
those who are working within the
mhm,
organization. You've
mhm.
also mentioned that in order for that shift to occur, because that organization, they're hearing about the change that they want to occur within the organization. And it starts with implementing the idea, which is the seed, but we
Mhm.
know that in order for the seed to grow and for there to be the shift, they need the action and the tools.
That's right.
Yeah. So go ahead and tell us how, one can be able to create those tools and how you have been able to do that with some of your clients.
Yeah, so I'll share, one of the things that the first things that I talk about, and it seems obvious. I talk about things that seem like they'd be obvious, but that are clearly not obvious,
Yes.
is I start with things like listening. Because
Powerful tool.
how we listen, and I want to bring this right on back to the unconscious mind in just a moment.
Hmm.
How we listen drives everything. It drives our responses. It drives our communication. And when we think about how the unconscious mind works, we have all this information that's coming at us all the time. And so we have to filter it down. We have to filter it down so that our neurological system can process it. Our brain can process it. Because we have 11 million bits of information per second coming into our system, but our brain can only handle 134 of those bits of information per second. So imagine how much we have to filter out, right? And so then we filter it through all of these filters, our memories, our beliefs, our values, our experiences, our traumas. And
Hmm.
then they produce our physical body response, which we label as emotions and self talk. And then we respond after
Wow.
all of that.
And
After
these are
we filter,
microseconds.
right, this is happening microseconds. So imagine we're responding through these filters all the time. How I teach organizations, where I start is by how do you expand the filters? How do you expand the listening? What are tools and techniques that you can use in a moment that doesn't take long?
Mm.
It just takes a moment to be able to expand your listening and see a different perspective, which will then shift all of the physiological response, what you label, your self talk, and shifts the behavior. So you get it at the source, right? You get it at
Yes.
the source. And so that's the first thing that I teach. And then once we start to get into the nuances of communication, it's what to say, what's the language to use, what frames to use, because sometimes people just they learn. We're not taught how to communicate, Dr. Tamara.
Yes. Absolutely. And I agree.
We're
I
not taught how to
agree.
communicate. We learn by I want to say how people say by osmosis, but we know that's faulty language.
Yes.
We learn by osmosis. We learn by absorbing from our environment as children.
Yes.
We learn
Yes.
by what we see. So I help people relearn the ways to effectively communicate. Like how, like really, like what are the words to say? How do you say the words? What are the phrases? What are the questions to ask?
Absolutely. And these are some powerful, powerful key foundational skills
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
you're right, it's not being taught that much. And therefore, when we become adults, communicating becomes challenging. And
Mhm.
therefore, it leads to the other section, which is miscommunication
Oh my gosh, all day long. And misunderstanding,
and misunderstanding.
because we communicate with a picture in our head,
Hmm.
and when we communicate, another person is listening through their filters, and so they may form another picture in their head.
Absolutely.
Misunderstandings, right? And how do you know when someone is not understanding you? How do you know how they're listening? Right?
Mm.
So these are the nuances and intricacies of communication that we're never taught, that I teach leaders, that I teach other coaches as well, because that's what we do as coaches is we listen.
Absolutely. And halfway through this, I wanted to let you know for some of our colleagues and friends who are listening to this conversation. So we have Dr. Una that's saying, "Hi, docs. Hello, hello."
Hey,
And
Dr. Una.
and we have Dr. Sharita Gaskin Tillits that says, you have her
Dr.
thinking.
Serena.
She said you have her thinking. Someone on Facebook is shown as Facebook user, but we'll jump on and be able to say hello. She's like key thoughts. Yeah, she's given
Yeah,
definitely the key thoughts thing. And then Dr. Latifat is saying hello, fabulous doctors. So we
Dr.
want to
Latifah.
thank you, a couple of our people who are listening to this. Now, bringing it back to key communication, listening is such a big step.
Mhm,
When people are not able to communicate effectively, we said it leads to miscommunication.
mhm,
When we have organizations who want to build that level of psychological safety, this is a great first step. What
mhm.
is another step that they might not be thinking about that we can just say, hey, these are some additional things that you can think about. We're going to just label maybe just one or two more
Yeah.
because we know that this is what you do. This
Mhm.
is what you do, but we'll give them one or two more of those key steps of psychological safety within that
Yeah,
organization. Go
I
ahead.
think the second thing that organizations need to do is they need to ask the questions, right? They need
Mm,
to look at what are the values of the people in their organization with whom they want that engagement, with whom they want that trust. What is important to them?
mhm,
And that's another huge thing that I love to talk about is in values, because we often think about what's important to us, and organizations have their vision and they have their mission, but they're
mhm,
not always certain if what's important to those who are serving the vision and the mission inside of the organization.
mm,
And sometimes when there's low engagement in a particular population inside of the organization, you have a majority of people who will respond, but then you have a large majority of people who won't. There's a wondering, well, how do I get them to engage?
mhm,
To ask them, and not in just a survey. You have to go
mhm.
and you have to interview. You have to create listening sessions. What? See, it's coming back to, right?
Yes.
So it's
Big skill.
all about, yeah, it's all about knowing what is it that's important to the people with whom you're wanting to create that safety, and
Mhm,
knowing what is it about the organization that's doing, like, what are they doing right, and
mhm.
what is it that is missing that would create more of that trust and safety.
I love it. Talking about the communication. Did you hear how Dr. Maiysha communicated that? What is missing, not what's wrong. And I love that. But what is missing? Because we know that within any structure, there are
Mhm,
things that people love, and then there are
mhm,
things that they would like to be able to help with or
mhm,
to improve on. And it's something that's missing. And if you
mhm,
can find ways for them to communicate that to you, right? So,
mhm,
because they have the info, they're the box with the present. You're on the outside and wondering what is in that box with that present. In order for it to be unfolded or unwrapped, you need to be able to get them to communicate that to you so that
mhm.
you can effectively make the change within the organization that they feel involved.
Yes.
But It can't be based on assumptions. It
Right.
has to be based on finding out from the person. Now, what is a third thing that we did? Listening, effective communication by finding out what's missing,
Mhm.
so we can augment that. And what's the third thing that you say, a quick little tip for organizations looking to build that psychological safety?
Yes, you have to take action. You
Hmm.
have to take action. If
Yes.
you say, "Okay, I'm interested," and you gather information, and then you do nothing with that information, that is the place of destruction of trust. That is a
Yes.
lack of integrity, right? So you
Hmm.
have to act with integrity and with transparency.
Hmm.
And so, like, even if something is going to take longer, you take some action, but it's going to take longer, you want to be transparent about that. But
Hmm.
action is the key. And you want to train your people up. You've got to train. So you can have like a C-suite
Hmm.
that is, you have one person that's on board, or two people, or two, three people that's on board that maybe have done some training, but then you need to train your whole C-suite. And then you need to trickle down into your directors and to your managers. Because if you actually want to shift the culture, people have to be trained up so that
Mm.
then this culture and these behaviors become absorbed by the entire organization. And that's how you create companies that thrive and grow. And when we talk about organizations, we could be talking about big companies, but you could be talking about churches. We can be talking about families. Families are an organization, you all,
That is true.
right? Families are an organization. So we talk about families, we talk about communities. So I just wanted to kind of bring it back again to different contexts, right?
Yes.
Yes, organizations are
It
contextual.
absolutely. And when you think about it, the level of the I am a visual person. So when I hear this, I'm thinking of it on a spreadsheet in a format where we're starting at the top. We're going and having that person truly understand what, even if it's just a mission and vision, and how what they do impact the next person on the steps of the ladder.
Mhm,
And then, as you mentioned, you spread that. Now, by the time you get to the majority, which is a larger portion of the organization, which will incorporate mostly the employees,
mhm,
they're already looking up and they see the behavior, they see the changes, they see the culture. And that's how culture is built within that organization.
yeah,
And therefore, having those in the leadership involved, understanding and on board is so important,
mhm,
because those who are in the next level are looking up to you.
mhm,
And like you said, that transparency is important.
mhm.
You're doing it and you're saying it and you're doing it.
Words are matching actions.
Words are matching actions. Interestingly, this is something similar that happens with things that I love to talk about, which is burnout, right?
Yes.
Within the organization, there's
Mhm,
still the words are matching the actions. If the people do not believe that you truly are a culture that wants to shift burnout, because you're
yeah,
saying it but you're not matching the actions, you haven't come to us to truly find out how we feel,
mhm.
then the talk is there, the lack of trust happens, and then the breakdown happens.
Yeah, I mean, here's the bottom line. If people are walking around hyper vigilant and looking over their shoulder because they can't trust the people in their organization, they are going to burn
To
out.
leave.
So you can cause burnout by having
Mhm.
a psychologically toxic workplace. I mean, that's like our
Absolutely.
whole industry, man.
Hmm. Absolutely. We know. Ask us how we know.
Exactly.
Ask us how we know. Now, talking about burnouts in this situation, on bringing it to a personal sense, have you ever experienced burnout? And if so, what did it look like for you?
Absolutely. The first time I experienced burnout was actually in residency.
Mm.
And yeah, before we were talking about it, before there was language for it, before,
Yes.
anybody even recognized it. And it was in retrospect that I can call it burnout, but it
Mhm.
was that like exhaustion and that weight and the feel, and again, feeling not safe. Like I suffered from functional depression. That's like
Mhm.
in retrospect, I look at that. And I remember coming home and thinking, I quit. I mean, like every other day, I was like, I quit, And so, and then I would go to sleep and get up and go to work again until I finished.
Mhm.
But there were a couple of nights, and one in particularly where I quit, but I quit like I was quitting life.
Wow.
And I was fortunate enough to have classmates that were safe. Even if the whole organization didn't feel safe to me, I had classmates that were safe. And I
Mhm.
was able to reach out and create a community around me, which is one of the most important things when we're talking about burnout, we're talking about trauma, we're talking about psychological safety, is who are the people who feel safe to you. And my classmates in residency, bless them, they got me through. Yeah.
I love it. There's so many times when we are in positions where we're feeling the hopelessness, the
Mhm.
helplessness, and having those around you who recognize these signs and symptoms to pull you through and pull you into the fold is so
Mhm.
important,
Yeah,
because during those times, that's when you isolate.
that's right. Oof, and I am a big isolator girl. I have had to do the work to build community because isolation is my default.
Yes, we
Mhm,
do isolate. And
mhm,
this is why, even Dr. Maiysha and I, this is why you see us throwing out information on social media about, burnout, about
mhm,
psychological safety, because we want others to recognize the signs
mhm,
in the instance
mhm,
when it's happening, in the effect that you need to help someone else to
mhm.
pull them from
Yeah.
this. So recognizing the signs. What is it that you have done to reduce your chances of heading back into that state?
Well, one of them was transitioning my career into something
Mhm,
that I really truly was passionate about. And it's not that I didn't like what I was doing in medicine. It was that I felt, so you asked about burnout. I'll share with you.
mhm,
I was headed back in the direction when I was in
mm,
private practice.
mhm,
And it wasn't because I was burning out of it. I wasn't exhaustion. It was
mhm,
more, it was more like this lack of accomplishment. Because when we think about
mm.
burnout, we know it, there's different things
Yeah,
that
the three.
people
Yeah,
think about: the toxicity, they think about the exhaustion, they think about the compassion fatigue. But one thing that people don't talk about is the feeling of lack of accomplishment.
absolutely.
And so I felt like I was running on this treadmill and not making the difference that I wanted to make.
Mm,
And so that's actually why I shifted out of clinical and started
mhm,
to do the work that I did, initially coaching and then more speaking and then doing what I do now, like teaching and
mhm,
training. I found, oh, that's my calling, that's my sweet spot. And so that was one of the things that I did. I think, and I'm going to speak to the pandemic, because I think that was another place where I started to become overwhelmed. It was connect, like find my
mhm.
safe spaces, find my safe places, and be connected all the time, which for a person like me who is an introvert, it can be very challenging. But
Yes.
connecting one on one is easy for me. I just had
Mhm.
to identify and create those community, create my mom community, create my doctor community, create my friend, my friend non-doctor community, create
Yes.
my family, like really connect into my family, right? So
So
connection mitigates trauma.
absolutely. Social connections are a huge, important aspect
Mhm.
within burnout to help to overcome it, and it's
Right.
also a huge aspect in self-care.
Yeah.
And that is something that I like to really highlight to people, because
Mhm.
no matter how you consider yourself from a personality standpoint, I'm an introvert, I'm a loner.
Mhm.
Most people, we're still social beings at heart as
Okay.
humans. And I even recall during the pandemic, well, actually, when it was phasing out, and I asked an introverted introvert, I said, "Well, with the pandemic, people we were told to what isolate, social
Mhm.
distancing,
Yeah.
isolate yourself." I said, how were you? Was this like your moment of, yes, now the rest of the world will know how I feel and I love being in my. And she said it took around like 4 weeks, 4 to 5 weeks. And she said she needed to she
Mhm.
didn't really want to speak to someone else. She just needed to see someone. So she
Yeah.
went out in to a park, an area
Mhm.
where it was
Mhm.
allowed, that she can just see someone way over the other side,
Yeah.
and that was enough.
Yeah. We're built
Yeah.
for connection. I was the same way. I was like, "Oh, okay, okay, isolation, no problem." And then, it was about 4 weeks in, I was like, "Oh, okay, now I need some people. I need
Yes.
more than my 5-year-old right now."
This conversation is getting a little bit.
Right, right. I'm regressing.
Yes. I love it. I love it. And so it speaks, like to say, we said it speaks to communication, it speaks
Mhm.
to listening, it speaks to being around in social beings, all parts of what we do and who we are as people. And
Mhm.
therefore, when we have organizations, when there is something lacking and there is I don't want to completely say a dysfunction, because it really gives a completely negative connotation, but there's an ability to build. There's this opportunity that's there, and when I think of it in that sense, I think of it more as like Tetris, where you have this ability to put
Yeah,
something in that spot and build the foundation, and
yeah.
and that's where you and your work comes into play. So I
Mm.
love it. All right, if someone else is telling us hello, they're loving this conversation, Dr. Kim Tronquada. Hello, hello. Thank you so much for joining this wonderful conversation. Now I'm about to take it to now. For those who listen to the Dr. Tamara Breakfast Show, I have my fun question, and today is no different. Because Dr. Maiysha, she hasn't been on there. I gave her an idea that I am going to ask the fun question where it's, if you weren't a doctor, what would you be? However, I had pulled out all these additional things that I hear you talk about during the conversation, so those are
Ooh.
no longer on the list, such as, no, you're not an acupuncturist, and no, you can't be a hypnotherapist, and no, you can't do coaching, and no, you can't do OBGYN nor dentistry.
Oh,
And you
forget about
can't
this.
be
I'm
a
good with
writer.
that.
You can't be a writer.
Oh,
No podcaster.
no.
And let me see. Let me hear if you ever told me anything that your kid does. I didn't hear you tell anything. Okay, alrighty. Well, go ahead. What would you be?
Okay, if I could be none of those things and I
Yes.
couldn't be a doctor. You know what? I at first I said I think I'd be like a travel blogger, but that would probably require that I interact with too many people. Like maybe not that. You know what I think I would be?
Mm-hmm.
I think I would be I would own a tea house. I
Ooh.
love teas, and maybe I
Mm-hmm.
would do like yoga or breathing workshops. I'd be something like doing some kind of like yoga meditation type
Nice.
thing. But yeah, I love the idea of having a tea shop, and because I'm a big tea drinker,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe like baking, doing some baking and things of that. Although I'm not a big baker, my sister's a big baker. Maybe I'd hire her.
Yes.
Yes.
I have a couple people too in mind. So, because I asked this with almost every one of my guests, and we've done over 200 interviews, because I
Wow.
have this utopia, talking about the unconscious mind. Maybe off camera you can tell me why I'm thinking this way. But I have this utopia for our physicians that I have in mind. And I ask everyone this question and I figure out who is going to be where. So you have the tea house. We have Dr. Megan Mello. She had a little bakery. We have Dr. Shiri Sharad. She is a florist and she has a nice little garden. And so we can definitely, and then Dr. Una, interior decorator. So we can see how this wonderful space is coming together. We do have some travel bloggers who will and travel photographers who will, be able to bring some of their lovely pictures and stories and art to this wonderful space that we are creating in Dr. Beckford's mind. All
We
right.
need to
So
like
thank you.
have like a compound, like a utopic compound,
Absolutely.
where we
Yes.
live up our look. I'm there with you. I'm not gonna be analyzing you. 'Cause I'm like, we need our own garden. I have a
Yes,
garden in
we
the
have
kitchen.
so
We live
many.
up our own
We
food.
have a park ranger, so we do. So all of these different, and then we have dancers. For my gift to you would be a backup dancing, and but hey, we have this wonderful, like we said, compound that we've built. Alrighty. Well, for those who are listening and are watching, and they would love to be part of Dr. Maiysha's world. They said, "Wow, I love this thing about psychological safety. I think I want to delve into it a little bit more, find out more about what it is, and see if it's right for my organization." How can they find you?
Well, you can go to my website, mindremappingacademy.com. And
Mhm.
if you're on any of the socials, especially LinkedIn is my favorite place to be. It's / Dr. Maiysha. You can reach out, connect with me there. If you just want to kind of dip your toe in the water and learn a little bit more, listen to Behind Beliefs and Behaviors podcast. And that
Yes.
will give you an insight to what are some of the other things that I talk about. It'll kind of nurture you through and
Mhm.
happy to help you to learn a little bit more. But mindremappingacademy.com is the HQ, is the headquarters for all
Mhm.
the information that you need to even contact me as well.
Love it, love it. So, with that, we are going to end today's wonderful conversation. Thank you so much, Dr. Maiysha Clairborne, who is here helping our organizations with our psychological safety to build that trust within the organization in order for you guys to be able to be at your best, to produce your best, to have your best people putting their best foot forward. Thank you so much for stopping by. Now, I know a lot of you guys are watching this, or you might have just jumped on. I know how it is. It's the middle of the day. And I know, I get it. Dr. Beckford, why is it that I'm just getting to this last of this conversation? I really want to find out a little bit more. What happened? And I said, have no fear. This wonderful conversation is available on our Your Caring Docs website. That's URCARINGDOCS.com. Absolutely. Hit podcast. You're going to see Dr. Maiysha's beautiful face. Download this episode and send it to 10 of your friends. 10 people who want to learn a little bit more about their unconscious minds, learn more about the mapping that goes on and the remapping that she herself can help, and also to be able to help within the organization. Now, if you are looking for a dynamic speaker on stress management and burnout prevention, I am she. That's right. Send me a message and email to Dr. Beckford at yourcaringdocs.com. That's Dr. BECKFORD at URCARINGDOCS.com. I would love to speak at your next event. Now, I know that there's some people here. Thank you, Dr. Kathy Ramos. I love you. I said Dr. Kathy Ramos. That's one of my wonderful nurses that I work with here in the Houston area. Thank you so much for jumping on, Kathy. For those who have taken the time to listen to us today, we really appreciate you. And we really love that you have given us a few precious moments of your day. With that, we're going to end today's broadcast, but it's available, like I said, on our Your Caring Docs website. And if you're on LinkedIn, YouTube, or Facebook, X, this will be available for you too. I'll see you guys next time. Any last words, Dr. Maiysha, before we head on out?
Yes. I just
Mhm.
want to thank you, Dr. Tamara, for this conversation. You
Mhm.
know how much, I appreciate you. And by the way, soon we will be releasing your episode on my podcast. So I will be promoting that heavily to my people. So I look forward to that and for us our continued conversation. So once again, just thank you for having me here, and
Thank you.
thank you for the listeners, for all of the people who've listened live today and who will be listening in the back end.
Thank you. Oh, we have another doc coming into our utopia. You will be our barista. That's right, Dr. Haney. Looking forward to this.
Right.
I tell you, that's utopia. Yes, it is going to be a blast. Alrighty. Thank you all so much for listening. I will see you guys next time. Bye bye.
Bye.